Alright, the next update is going to roll in a few hours. I'm going to go through what you might want to skip or maybe summon. First off, the live server, Yukine. She's pretty much a Point War exclusive Esper and terrible everywhere else. So I advise you guys to just get the Nexus Crystal Pass and don't buy the paid packs. Now for the current banner that we have in the live server, we have Ginchu and Uran. Let's go over Ginchu first. Ginchu is pretty much a PvP exclusive Esper and he's no longer the main meta anymore, and he's only usable at R6 in my opinion. R2 used to be good but not anymore, so you only go for his R6 if you're invested in PvP, otherwise skip. Now as for Uran, he shines the most in Phobetor, but he can also be used in Shadow Fire if you don't have R2 Shen Pin. But in Phobetor, he's the first one to get removed in this team right here. If we get a really good disease debuff unit, Uran is going to be removed from the team. While sleep debuff is good on Phobetor, it doesn't allow you to run Avatara sets, right? And if you want to get the highest score possible, you want the boss to move and attack you and you proc an Avatara. So it's better to run disease unit rather than a sleep unit. So he's going to be removed very soon. Now as for the upcoming banner, we're going to have Leora and Elaine for week 1. You should only go for Leora if you don't have Sloan for Chronos. Otherwise, completely skip Leora. And you should only go for Elaine if you have an R2 Amir. If you do have an R2 Amir, what you can do is you run them both in the same team and you can get a 6 turns average on Fafnir. Elaine's resonance does not matter, she just needs R0. The reason why she's good in Fafnir is because she has 5 hits. The only way that you can circumvent Fafnir's damage cap is by running multi-hitters, and Elaine has the highest amount of multi-hits in her skills, 5 hits. Again, if you don't have R2 Amir, completely skip her. Now for week 2, we have TA and Vital. TA at this point has been reduced to only have 1 use, which is running her in Team 1 of Sonica, and she is not needed as well. You can run any other AP controller and it would work just fine. Because she has double AoE, it's really difficult to run her in PvP. As long as Wu Yu is in the game, TA will not exist in PvP. So in my opinion, TA is also a skip at this point. Now as for Vital, you don't need me to explain. He has pretty much 0 use. He shines in 0 of the content in the game right now. Unrunnable in PvP, unrunnable in PvE, 100% skip. Now for the last week, we have Gabrielle and Clara. Gabrielle is still pretty decent for PvP if you're going up against a Yuhime team, because she's one of the fastest PvP Esper in the game that also provides immunity. But outside of fighting Yuhime teams, she's pretty much useless. In PvE, she's pretty much useless. So you'd only be summoning for her to go up against Yuhime team, which again, in my opinion, is not worth it. Clara at this point as well, kinda impossible to run in PvP. But if we do play triple threat, the guild versus guild content, she still has some uses there against some teams, but you won't be using her in beat bout or in knockout. She's still pretty decent for Shadow Gale, but outside of Shadow Gale, she has pretty much no use in PvE as well. So only summon for Clara if you don't have a Shadow Gale unit. So that's all for the side banners. Now for the main banners. Suai is an R6 D6 Esper. You cannot go any lower than that. Maybe D3. D3 is still usable, but you want him to be at D6. Bruiser Espers will need all of the stats you can give them, so you need him to be at R6 D6 for him to function properly. Once you get him to R6 D6, he is really strong in knockout and also in beat bout as well. Currently, he's one of the best beat bout and knockout team, which is scoring like, look at this, 15,000 points. And in PvE, he's pretty much useless. You can't run him in any of the Ritual Miracle. You cannot run him in Shadow Stream. It's pretty bad actually. You can't run him in Falso to Fantasy. You can solo towers, sure, but a lot of Espers can already do that, right? And what's the point of soloing a tower with a unit? It doesn't really gain you anything. So again, if you're well invested in PvP, this guy is a must. R6 D6, he's very good in PvP, but if you don't care about PvP, he's a 100% skip. And lastly, for the new unit, Zhou Hong. Now, it has been confirmed that his debuff will not work on bosses, which means his usability in PvE is going to be 0. He relies heavily on landing the overtime debuff on the enemy, otherwise he will not get the tough it up buff and he will do absolutely nothing. So in PvE, he's going to be useless. In PvP, I think he's going to struggle like crazy. He is a unit, once again, that relies on debuff, overtime debuff, in order for him to work. And in PvP, we have a lot of Espers that are immune or cleanse themselves. For example, we have Wu Yu that is completely immune to debuffs. We have Suai, the newest addition, that is immune to both buff and debuff. We have Momo that can also negate debuffs. We have Chuyao that can also cleanse every single hit you do, but that's not going to be his main problem. The main problem that he has is he has no damage reduction, he's not immune to debuffs, and he's also not a HP or defense scaling unit, which means when you build him, you need him to be at high attack, HP, and defense. And when you need to juggle all three of those stats, the unit becomes mediocre, especially when the unit only scales with attack. It's going to be very hard for him to survive. One Wu Yu counter is going to wipe this guy clean. One Momo attack on him is going to delete him. Our 6 Daji is going to screw him up because even though he cleanses whenever he gets the additional turn, Daji will reapply her puppet art debuff. This is the same problem that Nathaniel has. And lastly, when you want to run him in PvP with Lu Sheng, what happens is Lu Sheng will get the slack off buff on him, or slack buddy. When Lu Sheng uses the S3, he's not going to add any overtime stacks. Look at that. You need to do damage in order to apply the overtime debuff, which means he cannot reliably run with Lu Sheng. And most DPS in the game right now in PvP needs Lu Sheng in the team in order to do enough damage to Wu Yu teams in order to kill them off, right? So you can't reliably run him with Lu Sheng because of how the overtime debuff works. You need to do damage to the enemy in order to apply it. So this combo does not work in PvP, which means you're gonna struggle even more in PvP. So yeah, he's terrible in PvE. In PvP, I think he can be usable, but he's gonna struggle like crazy. So in my opinion, he's gonna be a skip. Between him and Suai, I recommend you guys to go for Suai. And again, only go for Suai if you are well invested in PvP. Otherwise, skip both of them. But yeah, that's about it. Ciao.